So here, I want to explain like the basics of just animation and moving things around, and we're going to be making a little movie with this thing here. So I have here this shape that I just put together in Maya, and we're going to make a little animation of some different sorts here, just to show things moving around, and we're going to make a little movie that we can see in we can see play the animation here. So first of all, I have to have animation, and that means things have to move here from one spot to the other here. So here, what I'm going to do is make this little ball here just to start out, and just like we saw in one of the previous classes here, we're going to be using this piece here down below here called the timeline, right? Now, what the timeline represents is each one of these little things here. This is going to be a little picture, and we're going to see this picture play in front, just flash before our eyes in sort of very fast here. So, and that really depends here on the frame rate that we're using. Now, the frame rate means like over here, we're using sort of a standard film frame rate, which means 24 frames per second. So that means in 1 second, we're going to see 24 little pictures flash before our eyes. And, if each of those pictures is different here, it makes it look like there's movement here. So, we're seeing those little pictures where we're sort of connecting them up with our mind and making, it looks like it's moving here. So, okay. If we wanted to, first thing you do want to see here in your, let me just set it back to the way it is, because I've been fooling around with this here. Chances are, if you've never messed around with this before, your animation is going to look like this. So let's make a little animation here, and I'm going to just make this ball go through this maze here. So I've started out here on frame 1, right? Why don't we? For this whole thing is going to last a couple seconds. Let's say 2 seconds is going to be, what are we dealing with here? 24, so it's going to be 48 frames. Let's give it maybe 50 frames. And so the end of my animation here, I want this thing to arrive at this spot here in my animation. So that means from here, it goes through that maze here, and I don't want it to hit its walls here, so I'm going to put in what we call in-betweens here in our animation. And what an in-between means, between this frame here, this is what you call a keyframe, and this is like an important sort of storytelling frame or an important action that we have. So my whole animation here, just breaking this down really, really simply here, is I'm going to take this ball and I'm going to set a keyframe here by pressing the S key on my keyboard here. So S sets the keyframe here, and that's if we look at our channels here, that's set the position, and everything else, like rotation, in this case, even the scale and the visibility are set here. And that's why you're seeing it's recorded 10 things here that are happening to this object here. So this is where I start, and for this thing to move at all, where I end up with here, it's got to be different here. So I've moved this around, and so you can see the values here, they've changed. And so all I've changed here is really just the position here. So that's like this right here, this is like the essential part of my my little story or my animation. So my animation is about this ball moving from here to here. Now how it gets there here, I've got to describe that a little better. So instead of just doing this here, I want this ball to move this way, and then to make its way through the little maze here. So, I could have done this. Right now I'm doing what you call pose-to-pose animation, meaning I start from one pose and then go to the other here. And then start to end. I could have started at the end and then keyed in the start too. The point here with pose-to-pose animation, you guys, is I don't have to follow necessarily an order in time. So like, let's say in here, in between these 2 frames here, I want this ball to be right about here. So I'll press S to set the keyframe here. And you can see when I do that, I've got a little a little red mark on my timeline. And so now it does this. It's still going through the wall, but not as much. It makes a little curve. It actually goes through the maze a little better here. So in here, maybe in here, I could use another, what you call another in-between here. So let's move this, instead of having this in that wall here, I'm gonna actually scoot this to the side here. Let's press S, and let's see what we get here. See, that's a little better. It's almost not hitting that curve here. And in here, you know, if I just make some minor adjustments here, it's now pretty, you know, pretty nice in here. And I can fill in these little keyframes here, and pretty soon it's not hitting the wall at all. So I got to work on this part here. So let's take this middle piece here, move it out of the way in here. And I'm going to set a keyframe here by pressing S again. And here, let's make it do this. And so let's see what that gives me here. There, so this should do the trick here. So now it's moving straight through that maze here. And that that's kind of cool. That's exactly what we want, okay? So pretty easy. I'm just setting the keyframes here, and let's play through that here. So I'm going to take my my little play settings here under the bottom, like on the bottom part of your menu here, your Maya workspace here. You have the timeline, and then you have this little thing that looks like a sort of a CD player here, and you're going to see the play buttons here. And again, if I'm just going to play this through here, and I think it's going to look a little weird when I start out here, but I'll go over that in just a second. So let's press this play button, and wow, it's going really fast. I mean, I don't, you know, you might not know yet, but I planned this to be like 2 seconds. So I feel that is a little fast. And when I say 2 seconds, you know, a second is supposed to be 24 frames per second. So I'm seeing 24 pictures flash before my eyes in 1 second. So I don't know, but this feels a little fast to me. So just to show you, if you guys have just started animating with Maya, then you're going to need to change a setting here. And you're going to come over here to the right below the little CD player interface here. You're going to see this little picture of this little guy, and it's got a gear next to him here. If I press this, you're going to get your animation settings here. And here, this determines like how many, what your frame rate is here. You could, you know, you could pick that frame rate from here, or you could also pick it in here. You know, this menu here is nice because, you know, you can pick a bunch of different things here. You know, you can determine like the animation. I'll show you this in an easier way to do that here. Let's just, for now, let's scroll down to the important part. Okay, what I want you guys to see here is the playback speed. This is very important, okay? So if you've just started animating with Maya, then I think by default, most of the time it's going to be set to play every frame. And that means that you're just basically telling Maya, look, play every frame in this animation as fast as this computer possibly can. And so, you know, it's not really concerned with the realism of the timing. It's just trying to show me all the little pictures as fast as it can. And sometimes this is useful when you're doing, say, like a simulation or something. You have like lots of little moving parts, you know, and you want to see just like the general sort of behavior of those little parts. Then something like this would be useful. But in terms of like actually like storytelling animation, I want to know what the timing of this thing. Timing is an essential part of animation. I would say, you know, just breaking things down into just like the bare bones definition of animation. Animation is what? It's kind of like it's, let's say, the poses or the positions of things or how things look versus the timing, you know? So it's very similar to like music, you know, where you have like maybe chords or notes, right? And then you have timing, and it's the combination of those two things that actually make sort of enjoyable music, right? Same thing with animation. You know, you have poses or in this case, just like keyframes or positions, and then you have timing. And it's the combination of how this ball moves through that maze, you know, like how it progresses through these little poses that's going to make my animation interesting here. So anyway, under playback here, instead of playing every frame, I'm going to have it set to 24 frames per second times 1. So that means it's playing real time, right? 24 frames per second is, again, that's my frame rate. And so times 1, it just means play it at its real time. You can play it at halftime, at 0.5, or you can play at double speed here. I'm going to play it at 24 frames per second. Let's save this out, and we can press play, and let's see what this feels like here. Okay, yeah, that feels a little bit like closer to what I expected here. And, you know, maybe we can do some edits here to the animation. So, I mean, this is just a beginning little example here, but let's say we wanted to change some things here with the animation. What I could do is, I feel this thing here, I feel is too fast. I feel like it moves too quick into this part of the movement here, and then it zooms in here. So what I want to do is spread this this part here. I want to move that keyframe a little bit here. In fact, I don't know yet, but I think I want to move the rest of that stuff here. So let's, I might want to move the whole animation a little forward here. So let's talk about this animation here. So what we're actually dealing with here, so I have frames 1 to 50, right? And you can see this is just the amount of stuff that animated to. And currently on my timeline, it appears that I can go to frame 120. So I have all this to work with in my visible timeline. But what I do want to show you here, whoops, excuse me. What I do want to show you here is that I actually have this thing here underneath that shows me I can actually go from frames 1 to 120 is what it's showing me. But if I click these little buttons, whoops, if I click these little buttons here at the bottom here, I press this little button, I can drag it out, and now I can stretch that all the way to 200. That's my limit. And then here I can do the same thing, and I can just, you know, I can focus on this part of the animation, or I can focus on, you know, in this part of the animation. So it's kind of like, if you guys have messed around with After Effects, After Effects has a sort of a similar concept with the work area. What do you call it? The work, yeah, the work area or something. So, you know, you can choose to focus on a specific part of the animation, so you don't have to deal with like stuff down the line here. And that's what this part here is called here. This is called the rangefinder, and you can just shorten your animation or, you know, or stretch it here. And what I do want to show you here is the things, you have these little numbers here, and you see they kind of correspond to what we're looking at here. So I could either way, I could stretch time by pulling these little things here. So it's like this. Or you could just type it in. So I say my animation here goes from frames 1 to 50. And this is just currently the amount of time that I'm looking at here. But my actual animation, it goes from frames 1 to 200. And you can change this here. You know, for example, here, if all we need is 100, I could just type in 100. And now the max I can ever stretch this here is to frame 100. If you want to go back to 200 or whatever, just type that in here. And now my animation goes to a max of 200 frames. Let's keep that here at 100. Here we are. Okay, so the next part here that I want to deal with for the animation here is, like I said, I feel this part here is going a little too fast. So let's play that again. Yeah, so it moves into this part here a little too fast compared to the others, where, you know, it's just moving along that maze. So I want to stretch that out a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get to this little keyframe, and I've positioned my little cursor right above that red line here. That's the keyframe, and it says it's in frame 10. This time I'm going to just hold down Shift, right? If I hold down Shift and I click this, this keyframe becomes highlighted, and you see that if I get in real quick here, you see I've got these two little arrows here that I can I can move this around in time here, and I can scoot this forward here to say frame 14. And in fact, let's move that forward to frame 16. Let's see what that feels like now. So now I like that speed, but then you know what? I don't mind this too much. I was going to move it, but maybe I will. Maybe it's a little fast. Let's go ahead and do that anyways. You know what? I kind of do like this. Maybe let's move it just one frame here, and I want to move the whole animation this time. So instead of just on frame 18, just holding shift, clicking, and doing this time, I'm going to move the whole section here where it says frame, did I say, I guess I did move it to 18. Oh, I'm wrong, it was 19. So I'm going to move frame 19 to 50. I'm going to move that forward just a little bit, maybe a couple frames. So to move a collection, a group of keyframes here, a range of keyframes, I'm going to hold down shift, and I'm going to click, but instead of letting go of the mouse immediately, I'm just going to stretch this out to the amount of things that I want here. So here, I'm going to do this. And now, because I've got a range of things here, I'm not going to choose the side arrows. If I do that, I'm going to be able to stretch and compress time, which may be what you want. You could do that too, you know. You do that too. The reason I don't like that here is because it puts things on sort of weird numbers. So if I'm stretching time and, you know, I've got a frame, I used to have a frame on 24 here. Let's check out what happens to that second keyframe as I stretch it here. So there, that frame is now on some weird value here that's not quite 29, nor is it 30. I can, here, I can use these little keys on my keyboard here to scrub through the keyframes here. So I think that would be, you know, it's the little greater than and less than signs on your keyboard. It's also, I guess, the comma and the period. So you see here, as I scrub through the keyframes here, it shows me the times of those keyframes here. So for example, here, it says 18.00. Now, that really is not quite 18. It's moved forward a little bit here. So what I'm going to do here is just take this. I don't like this here. This is a little funny to work with here. I would rather just deal with whole frames. So instead of 18.00 something, I just want that to be 18 because it's just easier to deal with whole frames. So I'm going to just, once again, I'm going to highlight this, hold down shift, I'm clicking, and I'm only going to let go of this selection here when when I'm done selecting here. This time, I'm going to right-click, and you'll notice here that you have some really interesting features here, such as cutting. I can copy this, and I can paste it, or I can just delete all the animation from there on. But what I want here, for this example that I'm showing you guys here, I want to snap to whole values here. So if I do this, now, if I scrub through my frames here, it rounds them out to the nearest whole number here. I like that. You know, so it's much easier to work with here. So once again, let's go back. And here you see I've got frames 18, I've got frame 29.65, and so on. This is just kind of a hassle to work with here. So I'm going to hold down Shift, click, and drag, and all the way at the end, I'm going to let go of my click. Right? I'm going to take this thing here and you know, again, I could just stretch this. I could stretch the timing here this way. But here, I'm just going to snap it this way. And let's see what that gives me here. Yeah, that's a little weird. Anyway, but that's how you could go with that. You could stretch the timing here. Now, what I wanted to show you here, I was kind of happy with the timing I had originally, mostly. Let's see. All right, so that I needed to change. So let's move this guy. I said frame 18, and then this. Let's see what that gives me here. It's up here. That's a little fast over here. So let's just scoot this whole section here. Let's scoot that forward. So instead of scaling this time, I'm going to move that whole section with the distance between the keyframes. It's called the spacing between the keyframes. I'm going to just keep that the same. And I'm going to hold this little middle arrow here, and by pulling the little middle arrow, I can just move this around as it was. So I think I started on frame 19. I'm kind of happy with that timing, but I'm going to move it a couple frames forward just to see if it improves a little bit. Yeah, there we go. So that's more like, I don't know, regular. And then here, you know, we can sort of reposition the frames here. Now, another way you can move the time here is let's take this, let's see if I can find somewhere to, yeah, all right, so here, this is too fast here. So here to here, I'm gonna stretch this time out here. So I'm gonna hover over 32, hold shift, click, drag, and stretch, and I'm gonna pull this little middle arrow here so that it does that. By doing that, we're increasing the spacing between frames 27 and 35. So there, that gave us a little bit more time in the middle there. And I think the end now is maybe there's this little section in here that for some reason it just feels a little fast for what I'm doing here. I'm not going for anything in particular, but if I were, you know, I would be paying more attention to timing and stuff. I'm just sort of making this up as I go. But that's how you can control your timing. And again, timing is very, very important in animation. All right, so here, maybe let's do this time. Instead of moving this, I want to show you guys a different way to do something here, especially if you have repeated animations here. I'm going to select the range of keyframes that I have from frames 40 to 50 something, and I'm going to right click. And here, what I could do is I don't want that there anymore. I want to just cut this out of there. And remember, I started from the first frame, and I'm going to just paste it on here to say frame 44. And I can right click and I can paste, and that pretty much does that. So like in this case, I just used that command to move something. So yeah, that's mostly what I want here. So I could do that, but I could actually I could do a little animation here where I could make a little happy dancing cube. And so in here, maybe I could just take this and we can copy this now. Instead of cutting, I just held down Shift, right-clicked, copy. And maybe in here, I can just paste this in here. And what I have here, well, let's see what that gives me here. And then I could just keep going here with this whole thing here. So this, I essentially have a loop. I think I have a loop here. Well, not really. I could have a loop here. If I wanted to make this a loop, I could just take this. Let's go back here, and I'm just going to delete this out of the picture here. And let's paste that back in. So now it starts where it ends. So now I have a sort of continuous movement that's sort of cyclical. And I can just, you know, keep going here with this. And so, you know, that's one advantage there that I can get out of copying and pasting things. So, you know, that's actually useful. In my example here, I'm making this up as I go along, but you might have a situation there where you want to repeat certain movements and not just affect timing. You know, you might want to do something over and over again. So that's you know, why you might want to copy and paste a piece of animation here. Okay, so to make this look cool, this is just an animation, but I want us to follow that ball here through this maze here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a camera here, and as I think I've mentioned before in this, like earlier in the course here, I want to keep my perspective camera. This is kind of like me in the 3D world here, and this is where I play around and try things out. So having a perspective camera is important to me. I do want to have something you know, and the reason it's why it's important is because like I just said, this is where I play around and test things out. Okay. Now, when I render an animation, I I'm not playing around. You know, I want to, you know, at that point, I'm really decided on like how I want to see things in the render, and you know, chances are, I'm trying to frame things a certain way, like in my camera. Maybe I'm following a storyboard. If you guys have ever dealt with photography and things, I'm sure you you realize like how important framing is. You know, it's everything. It's like your composition. You know, so I don't want to mess around with a composition. So I want a dedicated camera to keep track of that. So how I'm going to do that here is I'm going to go here to create. And what we can do here is we can go to cameras. And we have some different kinds of cameras here. I have a camera and aim, a camera, aim, and up. And then I got some other ones here, a stereo camera, which is like, you know, you basically have two cameras. So it's sort of simulating a right eye and a left eye, and that can be used to do like 3D, you know, like how you have those 3D films now that you put on the glasses and do stuff like that. Anyway, we're not going to be doing that here, but I'm going to stick to the very most simple camera here. So that should be this guy. And I just do that. If I just press this, it creates this little object in the world here. And you have, it says camera 1. And that's sort of positioned here in the world. I'm going to start that out here. Like this, and let's have that look at the ball here. Better yet, you know what? Let's have it look at the start of the maze here. I'm going to position it more or less here. Why don't we take one of these panels here? This is, again, this is me just playing around here in 3D space. And what I want to do here is I want to actually look at the camera. So I'm going to make one of these viewports. I'm going to dedicate one of these viewports to my camera view. So I can go to panels. I'm looking for a perspective camera, right? So perspective camera means like anything that looks like this that has perspective, where things are getting smaller as they come away from the camera and bigger as they get closer to the camera. So here, that's what that is. These other views, like what I'm actually looking at right here, this is what you call an orthographic view. So right now I happen to be looking at the top, but I also have the side, right? And I have the front, which is over here. So those are the views that I have, and I'm looking at the top, but I want to change this for now. I want to look at the camera 1 thing here. So I can do that. This time, you know, this is the view that camera is seeing. So as I move this up, you see it changes the view here of this. So like I could actually frame my animation to look here. Now, one thing I do want to sort of emphasize here is the size of this viewport here. So the size is really important here to make your movie here, because your film, your picture, your render, it should have what you call an aspect ratio. And you can see as I pull this window across here, it's actually changing the size of this picture. And it doesn't mean that I'm going to get a square out of this. It just means that it's just changing the size of this viewport so I can see it. This isn't actually what I'm going to see in when I make the picture. What I'm actually going to see when I make this image here is this. And you can see over here I've got these little shortcuts above my viewport. Any one of these viewports is going to have this. See here, here. They're all the same. This over here, this is what you call the resolution gate, right? And you can hover over any of these things. You can see kind of what their names and stuff here, and maybe a brief explanation of what they do. This is, again, this little area here, this is where Maya talks to you and tells you how to use things or whatever it may need to tell you. So here, the resolution gate, it does this. This rectangle here, this guy, this is what we're going to see in the render. So this means, you know, this is how I can compose my shot. So maybe I want to start out here, and I do want to frame this so that I see my little ball here. So I want to start with this, and I'm going to press S here, and let's see what this looks like as I move through the animation in here. So I'm going to move that little ball right over here to the side. So let's see what my movie looks like so far. So I've got that sort of following in here, you know, and you know, maybe I can follow that animation in here. You know, we could do, you know, as far as storytelling here, we could do some different things. We could do this with a cut. Because I kind of do like this here, where it's sort of going in here, it disappears, and perhaps maybe we just cut the camera here. And to do that, what I would do is I would create two cameras, you know. So I'll make another camera that, you know, this is, to me here, this is going to be one render. So frames 1 to 28 is, you know, scene 1 or shot 1. And then here, frames 28 to whatever, that's going to be my second shot. But just to keep this simple here, you know, we'll do that later. To keep this simple here, I'm just going to have one continuous shot where this camera is following this thing through this maze here. So in here, what I could do is I could just move this forward, which I really do like here. For this, you know, I'm going to do this. Let's see what that looks like here. It moves in here, and then it follows the camera in there. Let's have it at this point here in my viewport. Wow, that's a little fast. So I'm moving that in here, and I do want to sort of rotate it. Let's rotate this about 90 degrees. So I'm doing my best to do it here, but I do want to get into the viewport here and maybe do this. And you know what? We can break that rule a little bit, because eventually the camera is going to move here. So I think in terms of camera animation, I think the simple rule to go by is just simplicity. You know, less is more when it comes to this camera animation. So I'm going to try to get to the point here with this. Let's see what that gives me here. Yeah, see, that's not good. And then maybe in here, I can start rotating it here around the corner. Now here, I think I want to do some fixes here. One thing with regarding like camera animation and things, I think like a golden rule of just camera animation and just animation in general is just simplicity and clarity, you know. So I think, you know, here I am looking at this ball. It's pretty obvious that this animation is about this ball, and I'm supposed to be looking at the ball. Here, it starts to sort of move a little bit to the side here. So I think what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to position this camera a different way. This time, I mean, I could just still go here and just sort of try to center it out here. Another trick that I could do here, instead of just animating it with the camera itself, I could just navigate just the way I do normally here. You know, just like you do in the viewport here, when you press Alt or Option and you rotate around, zoom in, zoom out, or pan. I'm going to do the same thing here, and that's going to change the position here. So I'm going to press Option, and I'll press my middle mouse button here, and I'll just center that a little bit more over here. I like this camera now, and I do have it selected here, right? So I can just go ahead and set a keyframe here, and that's going to commit this view to my animation, right? So I'll press S, and now let's see what that gives me here. Yeah, it's not bad. I mean, probably could be a little better, but you know, that's starting to get my point across here. So maybe in here I'll do that, and this time let's unselect that here because I want to show you a trick here. I'm going to frame this over here, and now if I were to press set keyframe here, it doesn't know what the heck I'm talking about because I don't have anything selected, right? And that happens. Be very careful when you're setting keyframes. Make sure you have the thing that you want to animate. Make sure you have that selected. In this case, I want to animate a change in my camera, so I have to select my camera. And a quick way to select the camera here is to hold this button down here, right? And I'm going to click this little button down here, and that that will select That'll select the camera. And from there, I can just press S to set the keyframe. And there. So that does that. And we can mostly sort of just go through the maze with the camera here. This time I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. Let's hit S, and this time I can just maybe just rotate around here and then just pan over here, and let's see what that gives us here. Yeah, so there we go. That's our little animation here, right? Okay, so yeah, if I press play now, you know, I've got this little animation here, and I'm about ready to render this out. So let's do this. Let's create a ground plane for this here. And I'm going to use my Arnold renderer for this. I'm going to go to lights. Let's create Skydome Light. And a Skydome is basically a sort of a big white light that encompasses everything here, and fixes things here in the world. One thing that I just did notice here is my ball is it's like it's sitting on the vertical center here. So that was kind of a mistake here. So I need to fix that a little bit here. Now what I could do is I really don't have any up and down movement on this here. So what I could do if I wanted to change this here, I could, you know, just knowing that this ball is never going to jump up and down, what I could do is I could right click on translate Y, right? And let's delete that selection there. So I'm very close to 0. Then 0 would be the perfect center, but I'm going to move this up. So that was probably just a little sloppy of me. I could have started it up at, you know, at this amount here. And so now that ball is sitting on the ground here, that looks a little better. That looks way better. So I could do that. Now another thing, this is going to be a little bit more advanced, and we can cover more of this later. But let me go back to the way it was before. Well, let's say I did have up and down movement, right? And I don't want this thing to be sort of going through the ground like that, but let's say for some reason, whatever is happening here, I want to just to scoot it up here. So what I could do is I could go here to Windows, Animation Editor, and you're going to pull up what you call the graph editor, right? A graph editor, well, a graph editor is a sort of a nice tool in animation. You see it in different animation programs. Every decent animation program is going to have something that that does something like this. After Effects has is a graph editor or a curve editor. It's the same thing. Sometimes they'll call it a curve editor. And what it deals with here is the animation curves. So anything that I have selected here. So for example, let's take the camera here, for example. So the camera, you know, I can pick the specific property here that I want, right? So let's say translate X, that's the side to side movement here. And this is showing me here, okay, on frame 1, this is the value here. So I'm at something, whatever this is, 9.86 something. And then here on frame 18, I've got a value of this. And as I'm sort of you know, changing times here, those values change here. And, you know, altogether here, it looks like this. It seems a little complex at first, and it's really not if you understand the idea here. I mean, chances are, like, you've had, you know, you have those graphs and stuff in those different classes and things, and it's just about reading a graph. You know, you have time versus value here. And, you know, these are how those things relate. And now knowing that, you can take this this curve and you can change like the way it accelerates or slows down into that. So that's what the graph editor is really for. And we can get more into that later. I'm not going to make a very big explanation out of this. What I meant to do here, like let's say here that I do like the up and down of this ball here. Wait, not that, this. I do like the up and down. I didn't really animate this here, but let's just pretend. Oh, okay. So I deleted the channel there for that. There we go. All right, so here I am back with the ball here. And let's say I do like, oh, it does move in Y for some reason. Let's say I do like that. I guess it's accelerating there. I don't know why. I'm sorry, it's rising here. Let's say, we wanted to scoot these values up here. Let's say we wanted to have it fly away. What I could do is just select all this here and then just move this up by pressing Shift to lock it into the value here. Most importantly here, if you just press your middle mouse button here, I can move these values. I can move them wherever I want. That means here, if I'm moving them left and right, I'm moving them in time. And if I'm moving them up and down, I'm moving them in value. So, up, by doing this, it goes, it rises above the ground, What I could even do is I could just take this and I could scale this down here so it's like flat. And now I'm just going to move all these guys here up here. And now I've got this flying ball, which I mean to fix. So really quick. Anyway. Is that right? There we go. Let's have that. And if I just play through this here, that's kind of what it does now. So that's my animation, and I'm going to render this out. I'm going to render this out using just doing a render, and then I'll do a different version of this where I'm going to set up a little camera rig to do a better animation here. So okay, just to get to the point here. So now I've got my my environmental sphere here. What do you call it? The Skydome Light. And I'm going to create a render. Okay, so this part here, we do want to set up a couple things. Okay, so this part here, I think previously, just to set up a render here, if I position my camera here, let's say I press this little button here. Right, that gives us sort of a default render using Maya's render, and you see it's taking a while to make this the scene because I've got to render the scene because I've got different objects in it, but it's generating the picture here. And sometimes it takes a while to do, but here it goes. And it's made a little picture for me here. You can see down here, it's frame 12, and it's even showing me here, it'll show me the time that it used to do that. So that's, I don't know, it was some time. I don't know if that was quite accurate here, but camera shape, so on, that's the camera I'm using, camera 1. So okay, so I need to make a movie. This looks really nice, but I need several different frames of this here. So in order to do this here, I have to generate these different frames here. And you see, it takes a little while to make my image here. It's generating like square by square, and it's trying to calculate the light and all that stuff here. So I need to make 50 frames of this, or whatever it is, however long my animation goes for here. And I'm for this class right now, I want to go a little faster just to explain this to you guys. So I'm thinking on this computer here, this is a little slow to make. So I'm going to make this size of this picture a little smaller so it doesn't have to calculate as much. Okay, so let's do that. And I'm going to jump in to something I've not shown you guys before here. That is the render settings. And the render settings here, you have these little movie clapper thingies here. And way down over here, next to the sort of the blue ball here, you have one of these movie clappers that has a gear next to it here. So on this one here, I'm going to just press that, and that brings up this little window here, which is these are the render settings. So let me make this thing smaller. Come on. There we are. So if I make this little window smaller here, we can see what's going on here. All right, so I'm actually gonna do something with this. So for starters here, to me, it's really important that I set my project. So I'm gonna set my project to some place that I can find it on my computer. And let me make a new folder here. Let's call this maze animation. I'm going to go in here and let's give this, this is where I'm going to save my file. So I'm going to set this project here. That's the folder where I want everything to go. And it doesn't see the default things, so it's asking me to create a default workspace. And that associates that folder to whatever I'm doing in this file here. Let's give this a name. So first of all, my pictures, they need to have a name. Let's call it maze animation. And here under image format, I'll just keep it as an EXR because that's the format that that Arnold likes to work with here. Okay, we can keep all this stuff here, and I'm going to scroll down here. This is very important. Okay, this is the key to making an animation here. Where is it? This frame and animation extension. So that means, look, my name here for the animation is maze animation, right? So that means here, as it is, it's just going to be called maze animation, right? Dot extension, meaning in my case here EXR, but I could change it to a JPEG or a PNG or whatever. In any case, whatever it is I'm doing here is going to be called maze animation dot EXR or JPEG or PNG or whatever it may be here. So I'm going to change it here to something else. So these little guys here that say single frame, that just gives you a picture. Now, if I do any one of these other ones here, these will give you an image sequence here. So in here, I'm going to do name underscore number dot extension. Now this gets kind of interesting here because it lets me do various frames. And in this case here, it gives me 4 digits to work with here. So my first frame here, frame 1, is going to be called maze animation underscore 0001 dot extension. That's because I got 4 digits there, and that number is going to have 4 digits. Now you may be thinking, well, why does this matter? You know, can you just call it 1? Yeah, you can. You can call it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And what's going to happen there is like sometimes there's certain programs and certain computers that won't recognize 10 as coming after 9, right? So it's just going to try to put, it sees frame 1 and then it sees frame 10, which sometimes certain programs can think, oh, it's just a variation of frame 1, so I'll just put frame 10 after frame 1. So, and that's not the way it works, and that's why you have the frame padding here. It's to, it's just to tell it, like, I have 100 frames to work with here, so I would at least, if I had 100 frames, would want 3 digits here. So here, that's what that's about here. And as long as you have this set up here, something like this, I would recommend using name underscore extension. I'm sorry, underscore number dot extension. That's very easy to work with. It can be pretty much read in just about any program. That's what I have here. Next comes the amount of the animation that we're working with here. So we're telling Maya here to render frames 1 to 10. In my case here, I need 50, right? 50 frames. Is that right? Let's see. Oh, I was wrong. It's 60. So frame 60, and we're going to render each by 1 frame. Next, it's a good idea to check the renderable camera here. And so I'm actually not going to render the perspective camera. I'm only going to render camera 1. So I'll change that to camera 1. And here is the, camera 1. Here's the image format. So I can choose, you know what, let's work with a smaller resolution here, and you can see as I did this, it changed my image format. So I did have I had something else that was like a 540 by something. Here, HD 540 by 960. Yeah, 960 by 540. That was what I was dealing with here. Just to make this render faster, I'm going to go with something a little tiny here. It's at 320 by 240. You know, you could do that, or you can take this. I'm going to take this example here. I do care about the aspect ratio, you know, so I compose my whole animation around this aspect ratio. So I'm going to check this little box here, and I'm going to just make this a little smaller. So let's say 960. Let's call it 300 or whatever, and this now becomes 300 by 169 pixels, and I'm ready to go with this. So I can just close this out. And most importantly, because I've set up two things, when I set the project here, this tells Maya where my images go. And when I set this up, this tells Maya how to make my images. So like I chose everything from the name to you know, how long it goes for, to the size of the images, and that's what determines all that stuff. So with that in place here, what I can do now is I can go to Arnold, or better yet, let's switch this here to.
There's also the resolution, right?
Well, yeah, the resolution was that what I just did here. Look, the resolution was this, the image size. So I started at 540 by 960, which is this guy, HD 540 by 960, and then I just chose to pinch it down to 300. Let's do 302. Yeah, there you go, 302 by 170. That's what that resolution gives me. That's the resolution there, you know. And here, you know, you can pretty much set up whatever you need for your settings, your frame range. And now I've done just about everything I need to do except to make the movie itself. And to do that here, normally you could just do what you call batch render here. So, you know, to do the batch render, I would change this to, anyway, I'm going to change this to rendering here. And normally to do the batch render, you would go here to render and you'd create a batch render. Now for Arnold, it's a little different here. What you want to do here is you want to render a sequence. And I'm going to just hit this little button here. In fact, before hitting this button, let's hit the little option here because there's some nice things here to check to see. So for example, here you'll see that my active viewport here is the perspective and not the camera. So hold on, where did it go? Render, render sequence, where did that go? Oh, there it is, render sequence. Okay, so, all right, so cool. So this is what I was looking for here. I just wanted to make sure that I was on camera one and not, for example, not perspective. I do want to render camera one, otherwise I'm going to be looking at this, and that's not terribly exciting. So camera one, which is this is what I want to render. This is what I want to see. And we can just render sequence. And it opens up this view. And it makes us this little picture here. This is going kind of fast. You know, that's why I chose to mess around with the resolution here. It still takes a little while to do. So this would be the time where, you know, you really want to make sure you've set up everything right. And then, you know, you just kind of want to just, there's nothing much you can do here at this point. You're just letting the computer do what you told it to do. And, you know, depending on how you set this up, it's going to take a certain amount of time, but it's going to give you all those things that you animated, and it's going to show them, you know, like you did. And it's just going to make each one of those little frames here. Now let me show you something here. As it's making those frames here, I believe I saved this on my desktop. Let me pull that up here somewhere. And let's see, under desktop, I put it in something called house animation, or house project, or
Maze.
maze animation. That's right. Okay. So under maze animation, oh shoot, no, it did. I saved it in the wrong folder for some reason. So this actually went into downloads, and you can see the address here. That's where it was supposed to go. It's supposed to go under texture submissions. And for some reason, it went under this folder. Yeah, all right, so that's why. So here, you see, as it's writing those files, you see, it's making a new picture, and it generates a new file here. So basically, it's going to try to make like about, what did I say, 60 frames of animation. And then from there, I'm going to be putting my movie together here. So let it do its thing here. I'm going to pause the video. All right, so here you can see I'm just about finished with the render. I've got about, I think I said I wanted 60 frames of animation. So that's the final thing here, and you can see under the command line here it says sequence rendering completed, and you can see all my 60 frames in that folder. That actually, this is not the folder that I chose that I wanted to do it in. Well, let's go back. Sure, let's put it under maze animation here. All right, so in here, let's pull up fcheck to see if I can pull that up. I don't know if it does EXRs. I'm pretty sure it does. There we are. So here, I'm going to pick the first file of this thing here. Let's see if that does it. If it doesn't, we can pull it up in something like After Effects or something like that. Okay, yeah, it doesn't recognize that for some reason. And why is that? Sure, we can do After Effects. Pull this up. All right, so here we are in After Effects here, and what I just did here is I've taken those little images here that I stored to a folder. I'm going to open up that that folder here. So I'm going to go to File. Let's bring in things to my my project here. So if you've never dealt with After Effects here, I am going to I'm going to bring some stuff in that I can work with here. So this is your project tab here, and this is where all the things that I can use in my my project are going to go. Down below here, you have your kind of like your layers, like in Photoshop, and then here you have your timeline, like I just showed you in Maya. And then finally, you're going to see the thing that you're working with here in this area here. So under here, under the project window here, you can right-click. This is typically the way I bring things in. I'm going to right-click and go to Import, and let's go to File. And here, this gets kind of interesting here because I have this little menu that I can choose. I can choose to bring things in here. So here are my my animations here. I'm sorry, my animation frames, right? And I'm going to choose to import this in as a sequence, right? So instead of just having one of those things here, I'm going to import it in as an EXR sequence, and it's going to know how to put in because those things are named a certain way. After Effects knows how to put that together. I can create what you call a composition, or you can just leave it out. So here, if I just do this, I'm just going to bring it in without a composition. And here, After Effects has put this together as footage, meaning it knows that one image comes after the other. And all I have to do to create a composition here, a composition is like it's a shot or a scene, or it can be a bunch of different things. I'm not going to get into all the things that compositions can do in After Effects. That's a whole different subject for a whole different class. But it's very versatile here, and you can do all sorts of interesting things here with compositions. Just to create one, the easiest thing I can do is just grab the little folder, the little render that you made. I'm going to drag it down to the layers, and there you go. This is now created, just like that. It's created a little composition for me. And again, a composition is like a shot of your film here. And so if I scrub through the timeline here, again, this is very, very tiny. I think you guys probably want to do something something better or something bigger here. But just to show you what I'm doing here, in fact, I bet we can make this full resolution. Zoom in here a little bit more. All right, so if I play through this here, I also have a preview window in After Effects that looks like the little CD thing I was just showing you guys in Maya. So again, Windows preview is what we're looking for. Where'd it go? Preview. That's it over here. Control-3 is the shortcut, and you can just play this here, and it's trying to show this according to what it can see here. That's a little fast, is it? That feels very fast. Let's go to composition settings. Oh, you see, this is why it feels fast. It's because the frame rate here, it's the frame rate is set to 30, and I created this animation to run at 24 frames per second. So let's go here. Just once again, composition. I'm going to go to composition settings, and here you can see it's assumed the size of my render because I just dragged it in. The thing is, when I did that, I guess it didn't assume the frame rate because it just didn't have a way of knowing. Now, had I created the composition on the import, I probably would have figured out the frame rate here. So I'm just going to do this, press OK, and let's see what this feels like now. If I press play, or you can press the space bar. All right, there it goes, I believe. Let's go back here. There we are. All right, so if I press play or even space bar here, it runs through that. I don't know, it feels a little slower, but it's still kind of fast. But yeah, you can just check that out here. What about this? Oh, but right, the footage here itself, it needs to be reinterpreted here. So interpret footage here. I'm gonna go to main and assume this frame rate. Let's play that at 24 frames per second. Press OK. Now let's try that out here. So this should slow things down a little bit. There, that's much better. That's what I had in mind. So yeah, so that's our little film here. And then what we can finally do is you can send this to the media encoder queue, and I'm going to press this little button under composition. I'm going to go to add to media encoder queue, and we can set this out to what it's done when I press that, it's going to bring up media encoder, and on my computer it's a little slow. All right, so here this is media encoder, and there I think my file finally just came in from After Effects. So this is the composition I did here, and if you click on this little arrow here, you can choose the different formats that you want to save in here, and you can see I've got different things. It's all sorts of different formats here that I can save as, sequences of different types. I'm going to choose the H.264 compression format. And that gives you sort of an MP4 with this encoding style here. Here, I can choose to save it to a certain folder. Let me pick this, and I'm going to put this on the desktop somewhere. Where do we put it? Maze something. Maze animation. And here, I'll just save that maze animation. And that's where it's going. And this isn't going to take me very long to work with here. Now, if you did want to change anything about the settings here for the animation, you could just do that, and that would bring up all the little specifics here, which I'm not going to mess with because I don't really need to. But you could, if you wanted to take out sound or whatever, you could do that. I can't get sound out of Maya anyway, so I'm just ignoring this here. Let's press the little play button here and let it do its thing. And you can see a small little preview here and a sort of a progress thing here. And not After Effects, but Media Encoder is going to start doing its thing. This is a very small little video, so it's just, it's going to get done. At that point here, it makes a little sound usually, and then you have the little checkbox here. Here's my finished animation, and I can play this. And this is something I can share with whoever, and that's my my animation. Whoops. And this is kind of what we need to make the film. So that right there, you guys, that's sort of an overview of the general sort of animation and rendering process that you guys are going to be doing for for the exercise today.